Welcome to the Leeça podcast, episode 2, The Cost of Disconnection. So, last time we talked about what it means to live awake with courage and compassion in a complicated world. Today we're talking about the cost of disconnection and the importance of building communities. Because community isn't just nice, it's how we survive. I really believe that. Today, I want to explore what happens when we don't, when we've forgotten what it means to live in a community, when we slip into loneliness, and when we let ourselves be divided, when we start living lives small enough to fit inside a screen. Because it isn't just sad, it's catastrophic, and sometimes it's by design. Loneliness is its own poverty. We always talk about poverty like it's only money, like it's not enough to eat or no roof overhead. But there's also the poverty of the mind when curiosity dies, when we become apathetic and we don't want to think about things. And there's also a poverty of the heart when we stop reaching out to each other. And that's just as dangerous, I think. Where true wealth lives. I've seen some of the most generous people in Canada living in the poorest communities, out east in the Maritimes, for example. They don't always have that much, but what they have, they give. I've also seen it in the French Canadian culture that I was raised in. We weren't always rich, and I've seen much generosity happen amongst in these little communities, in the Francophone communities, and elsewhere too. And I'll be talking about that. So in the Maritimes, they open their doors without asking who you voted for. They'll pull up a chair, share a meal, and make space like it's second nature. Last year, I drove all through the Maritimes and around Newfoundland. Car camping, just me, my Cocker Spaniel buddy, and the road. And I noticed a lot. There's a lot of stories that'll come out of my experiences in traveling, but I noticed something very interesting about the graveyards in Newfoundland. Often they're perched right beside the ocean, and that's a very telling thing, isn't it? It's like a quiet acknowledgement that life is already hard enough, right? They have to survive nature. So salt winds, fierce storms is very dangerous. And so when you live in such a wild and unpredictable environment, you learn that all you really have is each other. Right now, there's wildfires happening in Newfoundland. I have a daughter who lives in Newfoundland. She's a marine biologist, and she has a house outside of St. John's, about an hour away. And my other daughter is there right now. I don't know if she'll be there for that long, but she's there. And there are wildfires. It's a very present thing in Canada, elsewhere in Canada as well. And you see people in these communities. I see them online talking to each other, making sure they're okay, offering. Just this morning, I saw that there was a post on the Newfoundland, one of the Newfoundland pages, Facebook community pages, offering a place for animals if people have animals and they need to get away fast. They're offering help and assistance. It's wonderful. So you see people posts about people watching over each other, offering advice and helping each other out. When men have to survive in nature, they cling to each other to make it through. That's been historically true. But they also celebrate and enjoy time together too, because they know how precarious life can be. So you open the door, you share what you have, you play the fiddle and dance, because tomorrow isn't promised. It reminds me of a poem that I came across many, many years ago in university by E.J. Pratt, who at the time I did not know was a Newfoundland poet, and I had not visited Newfoundland. It's absolutely wonderful. But this poem, now that I have visited Newfoundland, I understand the cliffs are insanely cool. And he wrote, I'm going to read it to you gently so you can hear. It's only about 8 lines. It took the sea 1,000 years, 1,000 years to trace the granite features of this cliff in crag and scarp and base. It took the sea an hour one night, an hour of storm to place the sculpture of these granite seams upon a woman's face. So when you live by that kind of power, when you see how slowly the sea shapes the stone, you can't pretend that you're going to be in control. I think we tend to think that we can control nature. We live in these air-conditioned houses, and everything is, here in North America, not everywhere in the world, but here we tend to think we can control nature. And I think that when you live in communities like that, very close to nature, you realize that you can't. And so you understand the value of community, and you hold each other just a little bit closer. But I have seen communion around the world, and I'm hoping to remind us here in North America that this is a good way of life, right? A good way of being. So in Portugal, I watched people. I went to Portugal many, many times. I absolutely love the way of life there. I watched people eating outside every night, and they would take out these long picnic tables. You would have a street one day during the day, and then in the evening, the whole scene would change. Picnic tables, people eating, music drifting through the streets, little flags overhead, people singing. Even during the week, they would get together and have dinner together and take time. And the kids would be running around underfoot, playing soccer. Actual communion. You see that as well in Montreal and in Quebec cafes. People are leaning in close over a bottle of wine, and sometimes they will have cross-table conversations, share a bottle of wine, and strangers laughing together and telling stories. And sometimes they'll play music, or, they'll dance right there on the sidewalk. And in Lebanon, I have not been to Lebanon, unfortunately. I wish one day I'd love to go. This is where my grandfather was born. And I became very interested in my roots, my Lebanese roots, when I got divorced and started to connect with people around who were Lebanese. Anyways, where he was born, it's even more heartbreakingly beautiful because it's so precarious. So they eat, they celebrate, they play music, they dance, because they never know how long that joy will last. And the Lebanese have a diaspora. I did not know this, but now I do. They have a diaspora, which means there are probably more people living outside of Lebanon than in it at this point. And they have this network that they call a diaspora all over the world. But they still call each other every week, often. Like the people that I know who are Lebanese will call each other. They'll call family at home, and they'll say, "Hey, how are you? I see you. I love you. Are you okay? How's Uncle so-and-so and cousin so-and-so?" It's how they stitch themselves together across oceans. And in Okinawa, Japan, where some of the oldest people in the world live, community isn't a side note, it's the foundation. They have moai, small lifelong circles of friends who meet regularly to cook, share tea, check in, and pool resources if anyone needs help. Studies show it's not just their diet or exercise that keeps them healthy into their 90s and beyond. It's belonging. I saw that they have probably the highest population of people over 100, and that's because of their sense of belonging. I really, truly believe that's the key. It's knowing there's always someone there who will notice if you don't show up, who will bring soup when you're sick, and who will walk beside you as you age. And maybe that's why, when the plane's coming back to Newfoundland, so after September 11th in 2001, the planes were rerouted, to Gander, Newfoundland. And nearly 7,000 stranded passengers came out of those planes from all over the world. And the people in Gander didn't hesitate. They opened their homes, they cooked for strangers, they brought toys for children, and they drove people where they needed to go. The local hockey rink became a shelter. Church kitchens ran around the clock. High school students babysat so exhausted parents could sleep. And no one asked for payment. It wasn't about money, right? No one asked about politics or religion. For 5 days, a small town became living proof that even in moments of terror, connection is still our first instinct. Aldo. So this week I was walking, and last year I was walking along the streets and I met Aldo. And I came across him again this week, so I'm going to tell you this little story of Aldo. He's a neighbor that I met. So just the other night in Quebec City, I had one of those moments that remind you of community. And the fact that it's right there, community is right there if we're open to it. So I was walking home along a side street when an older gentleman calls out from his porch, "Hey," and he's kind of hidden behind a screen of trees and vines on his little porch. And he asked me if I wanted to stop by, and I was walking with Buddy. It was around 8 p.m. We ended up talking all evening. And another neighbor joined us. Her name was Claire, and she brought a chicken from Costco, and we all talked, and I learned Aldo's story. I had met him initially and spent a little bit of time with him last year, and this year I learned a lot more about him. So he's Italian, and he is going to be 90 this year. He lived through the Second World War in Italy as a boy. He came to Canada. He became a chef at the Continental, which is a fancy French restaurant in Quebec. He talked about the duck à l'orange, and if you go to Quebec City, you want to go to the Continental for the duck à l'orange. And he was also a painter. Like I guess he supplemented his income, right? In order to be a painter, he also talked about famous painters. We had a lot of conversation that night. He also gave me some of his lithographs. I mean, what a gift, what an honor. He gave me two of his lithographs that night. And he told me to look him up online, where he actually has a website, or he's not, I don't know if it's his website, but he's referenced through galleries. Aldo lost his wife years ago, but thanks to his neighbors, he feels at home here. The reason he can manage to live there, I think, is because he feels such a sense of community. People check in on him. He's lived there for 40 years. His children planted a plum tree and some pine trees in the front yard, in front of his porch, and they're grown tall now. Just like Claire, who's in her 50s, probably the other neighbor who ate with us that night. So she had lost her partner too and was just happy to share the evening with us. It's not complicated, really. Building community is not complicated, but I think we've forgotten this. It's about taking time. It's about being a bit curious and open-minded. It's about people, and it's about food, and it's about stories. It's about saying yes, right? It's taking that little risk. Most people, I think, I'm not sure about most people, but many people would not have said yes if a man reaches out to you from behind some bushes and says, "Hey, want to have a glass of wine?" But it's my curiosity, and I'm not afraid of people. So I'm saying that sometimes not sometimes, in my case, I meet so many wonderful people, and I want to encourage you to just be a little bit more open. What has my classroom taught me about connection? I have seen this same kind of community bloom in unlikely places in my classrooms. If you take the time as a teacher, and for me it takes about 2 months, to put aside the evaluations and all of that stuff, and you really try to get to know the people in your classroom, as though they're people, not just kids that you have to quote unquote teach, right? If you take about 2 months to have them understand who you are, and you kind of get to know who they are, and you want to build this kind of trust between each other as well, students will begin to share their words, their real authentic selves, and their poems and their ideas and their art. And so by the end of the year, we're like a family, and we celebrate with potlucks, and we hear each other, and we hold space for each other. That's why I'm so fiercely protective of my classrooms, because I know how important it is to build that space where they feel a sense of privacy, a sense of home, and where they feel like it's a little bubble, if you will, that they can live in and they feel safe. They know that my classroom is a space where they matter. And that kind of connection, that sense of belonging, is what keeps our students grounded, but people too. And when we lose that sense of, I belong to this space, we all feel the ache. And I want to speak to teen loneliness, because I've spent most of my life working with teens, and I think we underestimate our teens. I don't think we always understand them. I think my students, especially before the pandemic, they told me even before the pandemic that they felt alone, even when they were surrounded by people. But after the lockdowns, the loneliness, it got just deeper, right? So the research backs it up. Rates of teen loneliness and depression are at record highs. Many spend hours a day online, but fewer feel like they have an actual close friend that they can talk to in person. And I have verified this with my students. Even though they're online, they don't feel like they can trust people. And I feel like this is common with adults as well. But when they do find connection, say in a classroom or on a sports team or in a band, in a safe group of friends, you can see them start to stand a little bit taller. It's very important for them, obviously, to feel connected. They listen more. They smile more. They are more actually ready to put away their phones than you would think. That's what I've seen. When you give them that space to do something else, they enjoy it. They smile more. They remember that they belong somewhere. If we want a future where people know how to show up for each other, we have to start by making sure our kids feel seen and heard and part of something real. So there's the illusion of connection, right? And here's the trick. We've been sold a substitute for real connection. We scroll through curated feeds, we click like on photos, we follow influencers who feel like friends, but who wouldn't know us if we passed on the street. It's connection without commitment, touch without skin. It's why we can have 5,000 quote unquote friends online and still have no one to call when we're sick. Real connection is slower, messier, and far less marketable, which is exactly why it matters. So why we've become disconnected beyond social media. Of course, it isn't only screens that pulled us apart. The pace of modern life has left people too tired to show up. We have long commutes. Sometimes people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make rent. Families are scattered across provinces and continents, and often they're chasing work. In my case, my family is all over Canada, and my daughters as well. And I love their sense of adventure, but we have found ways to connect and stay in touch, and we do. I moved away from my hometown, and I still try to make bridges and build bridges and keep connected with my friends and family. To me, it's very, very important. Town squares, community halls, places to meet and gather, even our post offices, our churches, grocery stores. These are places that we used to connect on a local community level, and they have been replaced by big box stores. They've shut down a lot of post offices, churches in, I don't know if it's across Canada, but churches in our area have pretty much been depleted in terms of their community. So, yeah, we've been taught to. So these new big box stores and drive-throughs. These are spaces that are built for transactions and not conversations. And we've been taught to prize independence so much that asking for help feels like failure. And then came the pandemic. Months of keeping our distance out of necessity until distance became habit. And bit by bit, our circles shrank. And one day we woke up realizing we'd traded neighbors for strangers and strangers for silence. So disconnection isn't just a tragedy. I believe it's also strategic, especially now, because lonely and anxious and divided people are easy to control. They're easy to sell to. They're easy to distract with gossip and noise. And at the same time, our forests are burning and our old people are sitting alone in nursing homes. We made the mistake, I think, well, in the States they did this, and we have given these corporations a lot of power over our lives. But corporations, they can't love, they can't mourn, they're not humans, they don't care. They don't have skin in the game. We'll be talking about skin and the notion of skin in the game in a further series. But, it doesn't matter to them. They don't care whether we have community or not. They don't tuck their children into bed or hold the hand of a dying parent. But they do pour billions of dollars into shaping laws while real humans struggle to be heard. And the more disconnected we are, the easier it is for them to keep it that way. Now, that's why I love the artists who refuse to shut up, like Banksy. If you don't know Banksy, look him up. He's amazing. He's a street artist, and his works are very powerful. He manages to stay anonymous and to paint in the dead of night messages about greed, about war, about inequality, and they appear like sort of without warning in the middle of a city. At one point, people were trying to tear down his pieces in order to sell them, which is really ridiculous when you think that his whole message is about, it goes counter to what he wants, right? But he's very interesting. His work of art is, yes, it is art, but it's also a conversation starter in a public space, and it bypasses media and it speaks directly to people, right? You also have Leonard Cohen. I love Leonard Cohen. He's a wonderful poet. He sings, "There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." His songs were never just about romance or beauty. They were about survival and compassion and holding on to our humanity when the world feels cold. You have wonderful Tracy Chapman, who stood on stage in a world that often wanted women, especially women of color, to be quiet. She has a voice like raw silk, and she sang about revolution and justice and love in a way that made people stop and listen. Listen to Tracy Chapman if you haven't. She doesn't shout. She tells the truth softly and powerfully, and that sometimes can be the latter way. You have Bruce Springsteen right now, the boss, and now he is one of those voices who's speaking out. Night after night, he stands in front of stadiums full of people calling out greed and corporate control and what happened to his America, even when it costs him fans. He sings about factory towns and the working poor and about the ordinary lives often ignored by the people who are in power. Art, and we're going to talk a lot about art. We're going to weave in art, music, culture all the way through these, writing, all through these series. Whether it's a song, a mural, a poem, or a photograph, art can slip past our defenses. It can connect us, right? It can connect people who might not ever speak. It's what I've tried to do on Facebook all these years, is share things that interest me, that will hopefully unite us, that remind us of who we are. Art can plant an idea that grows quietly until the day it's needed. And that's why the artists who still dare matter so much. So who is this for? This is for anyone who's ever felt alone in a crowded room. For the neighbor who quietly shovels someone else's walkway before the sun comes up. For the friend you've been meaning to call for months. For the stranger who offered you directions when you were lost. It's for all of us, because no matter where we are, we're part of the same web. Disconnection can happen in our families too, and sometimes without us even realizing it. It's not about just the outward community, it's inside the home. And it's not always about big fights or estrangement. Sometimes it's quieter. Someone, years ago I had a student and she felt so alone in her own house, and her father was downstairs and he was watching TV, and she'd go up in her room and she was just so lonely. And I thought it struck me how inside a home it can feel like you're isolated from the members of your own family. Conversations that stay on the surface sometimes because the deeper stuff feels too heavy. Special occasions that get shorter every year because we're all too busy. And families themselves have changed. Many of us live far away from the people we grew up with. Some have blended families, chosen families, or no family ties at all. That doesn't mean we can't have strong family bonds. It just means we might need to renew them in our own way. We can start small. We can start by eating a meal together without our phones or turning our phones off. We can call a sibling, a parent, or a chosen family member just to share something good, not only when there's bad news. We can ask questions that go past, how was your day? And actually listen to the answers. Sometimes reconnection means being the one to go first, even if it's awkward, even if you've grown apart. because family, in whatever form it looks like for us, is part of the net that keeps us from falling all the way through. So where do we begin? Start small. Look up from the phone. Ask the cashier how their day is, and you'd be surprised at the stories you can get sometimes. And really listen to the answer. Knock on the neighbor's door with some extra soup. Invite someone over, even if the house isn't perfect. That's my thing. I like my house to be clean and da-da-da, but I'm like, just do it. Join the choir, the pickup soccer game, the community garden. Offer to drive someone to the clinic. If you've been thinking of someone, call them. Don't just like their post. Even one simple habit can change everything. Calling one person each week just to see how they are. Not to schedule something, not to fix a problem, just to be present in their day. Psychologists say adult friendships are one of the strongest predictors of health and happiness, as important as exercise, diet, or quitting smoking. But most adults don't invest much time in them. One 2021 survey found that half of adults had lost touch with at least one close friend in the past year, and nearly as many said they had fewer friends than they'd like. I have an amazing group of close friends. I call them my people. And over the years, they have been so supportive of all these crazy life changes I've made. And I don't know where I'd be without them. I'm so grateful to have them in my life. We think, but it needs to be our friendships need to be fed into. We need to take care of them like we take care of a garden. We need to water them. We think friendship should be effortless, but like in adulthood, it's built the same way anything lasting is built. It's built with intention and action, calling them, visiting, shared time, showing up. And maybe most importantly, making connection a rhythm and not a rare event or an afterthought. I think it's a practice. So it's like getting up every day and brushing your teeth. It becomes a routine, a practice. Like the Lebanese diaspora. The more often we practice this ritual, I think the more natural it feels to show up for each other. We can't rebuild trust and belonging overnight, but every yes, every shared meal, every conversation over a fence post or a metaphorical fence post, is a stitch in the fabric that holds us together. When I think of what's possible, I think of Gander, Newfoundland. I think of the Moai circles in Okinawa. I think of kitchens that stay lit long after the meal is done because the conversation hasn't finished yet. That's what I want for us, not a perfect world, but one where you know that if the planes came down tomorrow or the sea rose or the power went out, someone would still knock on your door. Someone would still make space for you all at the table. So this isn't a call to like kumbaya idealism. It's a call to rebuild the networks that keep us human, to refuse the loneliness that power tries to sell us. Because we're pretty clever amoebas, or ants, as I like to say, on a very small blue planet. We only have each other. We still get to love and to protect and to build big, luminous lives. So, if this reflection spoke to you, I'd love for you to subscribe to the Leeça podcast. Wherever you listen, share this episode with someone who might need it. And join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. I will be there Wednesday evening to talk about this topic and share stories and explore our reflections together. I will drop questions about this for you at the same time as this podcast. And a little teaser for the next episode. In our next conversation, we're going to look at the power of joy, and not the fragile, sunny kind of joy, but the kind of joy that dances on shards and survives even in the darkest of times. So until next time, keep your mind clear, your heart open, and your courage intact. Thank you for listening.